In this video, we'll discuss the sensation of vision. By the end of the video, you should be able to understand or describe the basic anatomy of the visual system and discuss how the rods and the cones contribute to different aspects of vision. So now we're going to talk about the structure or the anatomy of the eye because light enters the visual system through the eye. So here we have the cornea, and it's the outer covering that's protecting the eye and bending light towards the lens. The lens is going to focus the incoming light, changing shape to focus light differently, whether the objects are far away or close. The iris and the pupil are going to control the amount of light that come in. The iris is the colored part of the eye, and the pupil is going to be that black dot in the middle that gets really small when there's bright light and opens up really big when it's dark in a room. So the pupil constricts and dilates to control the amount of light that gets into the eye. Now the light comes in, hits the retina in the back of the eye, and the retina is considered neural tissue, and it's what we're going to focus on. So it lines the back of the eye and contains photoreceptors. On the coming slides, we'll talk about these photoreceptors. The fovea is in the center of the retina, and that is where the lens focuses the light. And here's just a little meme, a little bit of eyeball humor. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the anatomy of the retina. Again, the retina is the back of that eyeball, and it is considered neural tissue, considered an extension of the brain, because it's formed from the neural tube, and the neural tube is what becomes the brain. It contains visual receptors. And so one thing you should keep in mind is that the image that's projected to the retina is actually upside down, and the brain interprets that image then as right side up. So there are two types of receptors in the retina. We have the rods and cones. The rods make up the majority of the cells, and they are more sensitive to light than the cones are. They're going to allow us to see at night. In other words, they're the visual receptors that respond to dim light. And here you can see this is what a rod looks like. You don't need to really worry about the anatomy of the rod, and rods are more concentrated out in the periphery of the retina. Cones are the photoreceptors that are going to allow us to see color vision. So think cones, color. As you can see over here, they're named for their cone-like shape, and they respond to different wavelengths of light. The cones outnumber the rods in the fovea or in the center of the retina. So the rods and the cones synapse on a couple of other cells, bipolar neurons and ganglion cells. We're not going to talk about those in this class, but basically light hits the photoreceptors, photoreceptors send signals to the bipolar cells, then to the ganglion cells, and then an active potential is going to travel along this optic nerve. So the optic nerve are axons that exit the retina and travel to the brain. Where the optic nerve leaves the retina is considered a blind spot. So you can see here there are no photoreceptors in this area where the optic nerve leaves the retina. And we'll talk a little bit in coming videos about how the visual system compensates for this blind spot. Here's another diagram, a different view of the visual system. We have light that hits the back of the retina, synapsing on a couple other cells, then sending an active potential along that optic nerve back to that visual cortex. Now, you see here, some of those axons are crossing at what's called the optic chiasm. So the optic chiasm is the crossing point of the optic nerve, allowing information to go to the contralateral side of the brain. So information from our left visual field is going to go to the right side of the brain, and information from our right visual field is going to go to the left side of the brain. And you see some of the nerves or the axons from the left eye go to the left hemisphere, and that's because they are getting information from the right visual field. And you don't need to worry about all that, just understand that the optic chiasm is where information crosses to the opposite side of the brain. And the occipital lobe, which we've discussed, is back here in the posterior part of the brain, and it houses the primary visual cortex. So light hits the eyes, stimulates photoreceptors in the retina. Those synapse on a couple of other neurons, sending an active potential along the optic nerve to that visual cortex in the occipital lobe.